The transport shuttle rattled like a tin can full of rocks. David Ross pressed his forehead against the cold window and watched Earth shrink behind him. His wrists ached from the magnetic cuffs. The two guards sitting across from him didn't bother looking his way. To them, he was just another criminal heading to die in space. 42 years of life. And it came down to this. David had spent 20 years perfecting his craft, learning to make people happy with simple food done right. His little restaurant in Chicago wasn't fancy, but people came back week after week because he cooked with heart. Then one night, a galactic council diplomat ate at his place and dropped dead 2 hours later. Poison, they said. David's fingerprints on the plate, security footage of him preparing the meal, traces of the toxin in his kitchen that he knew he didn't do it. His lawyer knew too, probably, but the evidence was perfect, too perfect, and David's old business partner Richard had bought the restaurant property 3 days after the arrest. Funny how that worked. Blackstone Station in 15 minutes. The pilot announced through the speaker. David's stomach twisted. He'd heard about Blackstone. Everyone had. It orbited a gas giant so far from civilization that rescue would take months. The galaxy sent its worst criminals there to disappear. Murderers, pirates, war criminals from a dozen different species. And now, one chef who made the mistake of trusting the wrong person. The station appeared in the viewport like a chunk of dark metal stabbed through with lights. It looked hungry. David swallowed hard and tried to remember what his daughter Amy looked like when she smiled. That memory was getting harder to hold on to. She'd stopped visiting after the second month, stopped answering his messages after the third. She believed he did it. Everyone did. The shuttle docked with a clang that rattled David's teeth. The guards hauled him to his feet and shoved him toward the airlock. Beyond the door, he could hear voices, dozens of them, speaking languages he didn't recognize. The sound echoed off metal walls like rocks in a barrel. The airlock hissed open. The smell hit him first, sweat and recycled air, and something sharp he couldn't name. The intake area was packed with prisoners, some human, most not. A massive creature with 4 arms and gray skin watched him with too many eyes. Something small and covered in blue scales hissed as he passed. David kept his eyes down and tried not to shake. Fresh meat, someone called out. Laughter followed, mean and sharp, that a guard with a face like weathered leather grabbed David's arm. Ross, David. Kitchen assignment. You cook, right? Yes, sir, David said quietly. Good. We need bodies in the kitchen. Last guy quit. The guard's expression suggested quit meant something worse. I'm Officer Brandt. Follow the rules. Keep your head down. Maybe you last a year. Cause trouble. You'll wish you died on Earth. Brandt led him through corridors that all looked the same, gray metal and flickering lights. Other prisoners watched him pass. Some looked curious. Others looked like they were calculating how long he'd survive. David figured the answer was not long. The cell block was worse than he imagined. Tiny boxes stacked on top of each other, each one holding a person or something that used to be one. Brandt shoved him into a cell barely big enough to lie down in. The door slammed shut with a sound like a closing grave. David sat on the hard bunk and put his head in his hands. This was it. This was the rest of his life, however long that lasted. He thought about Amy, about his restaurant, about the smell of fresh bread in the morning. All gone. All stolen by someone who wanted what he had. The next morning, guards dragged him to the kitchen. It was massive, industrial, designed to feed thousands. The head cook was a short alien with tentacles instead of arms and a disposition like vinegar. He showed David the stations, the equipment, the schedule. Everything was efficient, joyless, designed to produce calories and nothing else. You make what you're told when you're told, the alien said in choppy English. No creativity, no implants. Understand. David nodded. He understood. This wasn't cooking. This was assembly, fuel production for bodies that needed to keep moving. The work was mindless. Boil this. Heat that. Slop it on trays. The other kitchen workers didn't talk much. By lunch, David's back ached and his hands were raw. By dinner, he felt like a machine himself. Officer Brandt appeared near the end of shift. Ross, got a special assignment for you. David looked up from his sink. Sir, every Friday, you prepare a meal for Sector 7. Special prisoner. Gets one hot meal a week. Brant's expression was unreadable. Last 3 cooks assigned to this refused. Spent a month in solitary for disobedience. What am I cooking for? David asked. Brant almost smiled. You'll find out Friday. Piece of advice? Make it good. Real good. The thing in Sector 7 doesn't like being disappointed. Thing. David's throat went dry. You'll see. Brant turned to leave, then paused. The last cook who actually did the job quit after 2 weeks. Said he couldn't take it anymore. Just you and whatever's in that cell once a week. Most inmates don't last long at Blackstone, Ross. But the ones who feed the beast, they don't last at all. The guard walked away, leaving David standing in the kitchen with soapy water dripping from his hands and fear climbing up his spine like ice. Friday was 4 days away. 4 days to wonder what waited in Sector 7. 4 days to imagine what kind of creature needed a special meal and scared trained cooks in a solitary confinement. David dried his hands slowly. Whatever it was, he'd find out soon enough. In the meantime, he had a job to do and a life to survive, one miserable day at a time. Friday came too fast. David barely slept Thursday night, lying awake in his cell, imagining what lived in Sector 7. The rumors among prisoners ranged from ridiculous to terrifying. Some said it was a failed genetic experiment. Others claimed it was the last survivor of a species the council had tried to wipe out. One old human prisoner just shook his head and said, "Don't look it in the eyes. That's all I'll tell you." Officer Grant collected him after breakfast. 3 more guards joined them, all carrying weapons David had never seen before. Energy rifles, maybe the kind that could punch holes through steel. "We taking an army just to deliver food?" David asked, trying to sound braver than he felt. "You'll understand when you see it," Brant said. They walked for 15 minutes, going deeper into the station. The corridors changed. The walls got thicker. Heavy security doors blocked their path every few hundred feet, each one requiring clearance from multiple guards. David counted 12 checkpoints before they reached Sector 7. The final door was different from the others. Reinforced, covered in warning signs in a dozen languages. David could read the English ones. Extreme danger. Lethal force authorized. Do not approach barrier. The door opened with a hiss that sounded like something dying. Heat rolled out thick and dry. David stepped inside and stopped breathing. The chamber was enormous, big enough to hold his entire restaurant 10 times over. The walls were scorched black in places. Claw marks gouged the metal like paper. And in the center, wrapped in chains that glowed with blue energy, was something out of ancient nightmares, not a dragon. David had seen pictures, videos, artist renderings of the drake species. None of it prepared him for the real thing. The creature was massive, easily 30 feet from nose to tail. Scales the color of deep crimson covered its body, darker along the spine, almost black at the edges. Wings that could blot out stars were folded tight against its sides, bound by the glowing restraints. For legs ending in claws that could tear through ship hulls, and eyes like molten gold that fixed on David the moment he entered. "Holy hell," David whispered. "That's Kravik," Brant said behind him. "Been here 40 years. Council wants him alive. Something about information, colony locations, war crimes. Above my pay grade. Your job is to feed it and get out. The slot's over there." Brant pointed to a reinforced drawer mechanism in the wall. David was supposed to load the food, push it through, and leave. Simple. Safe. The dragon hadn't moved, but those golden eyes tracked every step David took. Intelligence burned in that gaze. Not animal cunning, but real thinking, the kind that made David's skin prickled. He'd prepared the meal earlier, working from a basic list the previous cook had left behind. Protein, grains, some kind of vegetable matter. Institutional garbage, the same joyless fuel they fed everyone else. But David couldn't help himself. He'd added seasoning, adjusted the temperature, arranged it so it at least looked like someone cared. Old habits. David loaded the food into the drawer and pushed it through. Mechanical arms extended on the other side, carrying the tray to within reach of the dragon's chains. The restraints allowed just enough movement for eating, nothing more. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Kravik's massive head lowered toward the tray. David saw the nostrils flare, taking in the scent. Why does it smell different? The voice hit David like a physical thing. Deep, resonant, each word pronounced with careful precision. The dragon could talk. Of course it could talk, but somehow hearing it made everything more real. I'm new, David said before he could stop himself. The guards tensed. I'm just a chef. I made it the way I know how. The golden eyes lifted to meet his. A chef, not a guard, not a soldier. No, sir, just someone who cooks food. Something shifted in Kravik's expression. The dragon took a bite, chewed slowly. David watched emotions cross that massive face: surprise, confusion, something that might have been pleasure. No one has made food with care in 40 years, Kravik said quietly. Everything tastes of duty and disgust. This tastes of craft. David didn't know what to say. The guards were staring at him like he'd grown a second head. Brant moved his hand toward his weapon. It's what I do, David finally said. Make things taste good. Or I did, before I ended up here. You were a prisoner. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Life sentence. Wrongly convicted, but that doesn't matter much anymore. Kravik ate in silence for a moment. Then what was your crime? They say I poisoned someone. A council diplomat. I didn't do it, but the evidence said otherwise. Evidence can be manufactured. Yes, sir. Learned that the hard way. The dragon finished eating and pushed the tray away with one massive claw. The chains rattled, and David saw something he hadn't noticed before. The blue energy wasn't just holding Kravik in place. It was hurting him. Small burns marked the scales where the restraints touched, never healing, always fresh. You should leave, Chef, Kravik said. The guards grow nervous when I speak. They fear I will convince you to free me. Will you? David asked. Those golden eyes studied him. Would you free me if I asked? David thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know. Probably not. I don't know what you did to end up here. But I don't think I'd like watching someone suffer like this regardless. Silence filled the chamber. The guards were definitely nervous now. Brant moved forward. Time to go, Ross. Next Friday, Kravik said suddenly. Come back next Friday, Chef. I would speak with you again. David nodded. He didn't know why. Maybe because those eyes held something he recognized, the look of someone trapped by forces beyond their control, someone the universe had decided deserved punishment whether they earned it or not. The guards pulled him back toward the door. As they left, David heard Kravik's voice one more time, softer now, almost wondering. Thank you for the meal. The door sealed behind them. Brant stared at David. In 5 years, that thing hasn't spoken more than 10 words. Today, it had a conversation. With you. Is that bad? David asked. I don't know, Brant admitted. But you better make sure you show up next Friday. The dragon asked for you. Around here, that's not a request. David walked back to the kitchen in silence, his mind full of gold eyes and careful words and the smell of charred metal. 1 week until Friday. 7 days to figure out what he'd just gotten himself into. Weeks turned into months, and Fridays became the only thing David lived for. Every week, he prepared Kravik's meal with the same care he'd once used for his best customers. Every week, they talked while the dragon ate, conversations that stretched longer each time despite the guards' nervous shuffling. David learned about the Drakes, about their homeworld that no longer existed. Kravik described mountains that touched the clouds and oceans that glowed at night. He spoke of honor codes older than human civilization, of families bound by oaths that lasted generations. The Drakes didn't lie, didn't break promises, didn't abandon their people, which was why Kravik had been in this cell for 40 years. They want the location of sanctuary, Kravik explained one Friday, his voice heavy with old pain. The last colony world. 300 of my people, all that remain of millions. The council says they only want to open diplomatic relations, but I have seen what they do to species they consider dangerous. So you stay here and suffer, David said quietly. So I stay here and protect them. My pain means nothing compared to their survival. David understood that kind of loyalty, even if he'd never experienced it himself. His own daughter had abandoned him the moment things got hard. But he didn't say that. Instead, he told Kravik about cooking, about the way different flavors combined, about the satisfaction of making something with your hands that brought joy to others. It sounds like art, Kravik observed. It is. Was. I don't know anymore. David stared at the institutional slop he'd transformed as best he could. Hard to call this art. You make beauty from limitation. That is the highest form of craft. The word stuck with David through the rest of the week. In his cell at night, he rolled them around in his mind like smooth stones. Someone saw value in what he did. Even here, even now, other prisoners noticed the change. David no longer walked with his eyes down. The connection to Kravik gave him a strange kind of protection. Nobody wanted trouble with the man who talked to the beast in Sector 7. Even the gangs left him alone, but not everyone was happy about it. Officer Brandt pulled David aside one evening after kitchen duty. They stood in an empty corridor, the guards face tight with worry. "You need to be careful, Ross." "Sir, Administrator Wells has noticed you. He's asking questions about the Friday meals, about how long you spend in Sector 7. Brandt glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Wells is dirty. He's been skimming funds meant for prisoner care, selling supplies on the black market. Council inspectors are coming in 3 months." David's stomach dropped. What does that have to do with me? He needs a scapegoat. Kitchen supervisor is perfect. He's been documenting your mistakes, making up violations, building a case. When the inspectors come, he'll blame you for the missing supplies and food quality issues. Brandt met his eyes. He's planning a riot, Ross. Stage violence where you get caught in the crossfire. Accidental death. Clean and simple. When? The word came out as a whisper. 3 weeks. I'm sorry. I have a family back on Earth. I can't help you directly. But I wanted you to know. Brandt walked away, leaving David alone in the corridor with fear crawling up his spine. 3 weeks to live. Everything he'd survived, all the days of keeping his head down and following rules, and it meant nothing. Wells would kill him to cover his own crimes, and nobody would question it. That Friday, David's hands shook as he prepared Kravik's meal. The dragon noticed immediately. "You are trouble, my friend." Friend? Well, had that happened? When had a human chef and a dragon prisoner become friends? David didn't know, but the word made his chest ache. "I'm going to die," David said. He explained everything, the embezzlement, the inspection, Wells' plan. The words poured out like water from a broken dam. 3 weeks, and I'm dead. Just like that. I survived the conviction, survived this place, and it doesn't matter. Kravik was silent for a long time. The golden eyes burned with something David had never seen before. Rage, maybe, or determination. "You have been kind to me," the dragon finally said. "When I was treated as a beast, you treated me as a person. You brought me food made with care. You spoke to me as an equal. The Drakes do not forget debts of honor." What does that mean? It means I've been testing these restraints for 40 years. Every day, a little pressure, a small adjustment. The guards do not notice because I move slowly, patiently. They believe the chains are unbreakable. Kravik's voice dropped lower. "They are wrong." David stared. "You can escape? I can. I have been waiting for a reason, for something worth breaking my endurance. You have given me that reason. I don't understand. My people have a tradition called the Shield Oath, a bond between protector and protected. You are innocent, David Ross. You have been wronged by those in power, just as my people have. If you will help me deliver a message to Sanctuary, I will free you from this place and give you the evidence to clear your name." "How? How could you possibly do that? The Drakes have perfect memory. I remember everything I have ever seen. I was in your restaurant the night the diplomat died. I saw who poisoned him. A human with gray hair and expensive clothes, an aide to Council Member Harrison. He added something to the diplomat's drink while you were in the kitchen. I remember his face perfectly. With Drake's technology, we can extract my memory and create evidence that cannot be falsified." David's heart hammered against his ribs. "You're talking about breaking out of a maximum security prison. They'll kill us both. Perhaps. Or perhaps we both become free. I offer you a choice, Chef. Stay safe and die in 3 weeks, or trust a dragon and risk everything for the chance at life." The golden eyes held his, patient, understanding. David thought about Amy, about his restaurant, about all the years he had left that would be stolen by a corrupt administrator's greed. He thought about dying in a prison riot, just another forgotten casualty. Then he thought about Kravik alone in this cell for 40 years, still protecting his people, still choosing honor over escape. "What do you need me to do?" David asked. 2 weeks left. David moved through the prison like a ghost, going through motions while his mind spun with plans and terror. Kravik had laid everything out during their last conversation. The escape would happen next Friday, giving them 7 days to prepare. The plan was insane. David needed to smuggle specific materials into Sector 7, compounds that would react to dragon plasma and create a controlled explosion. Nothing huge, just enough to damage the restraint generators. Once those failed, Kravik could break free. Then they'd fight their way to the docking bay, where Administrator Wells kept his private shuttle. Simple, except for the 100 ways it could go wrong. David spent every spare moment in the kitchen, identifying ingredients and materials that matched Kravik's requirements. Certain metals from cleaning supplies, chemical compounds from food preservatives, items that individually meant nothing, but together would become explosive. He moved them slowly, carefully, hiding them in his workstation where nobody would notice. The other prisoners sensed something coming. Violence had a smell in places like this, a tension that built in the air like static before a storm. Fights broke out more often. Guards walked in larger groups. Even the aliens who didn't speak English knew something was wrong. Officer Brandt avoided David's eyes now. The guard had done what he could, warned him, given him a chance. Nothing more to say. On Tuesday, David smuggled the last component into his station. Everything was ready. 3 more days until Friday. 3 more days until he either escaped or died trying. That night, lying in his cell, David let himself think about Amy. His daughter would be 20 now. He'd missed her last 2 birthdays, her graduation, all the moments that mattered. If he died on Friday, she'd never know he was innocent. She'd spend the rest of her life believing her father was a murderer. But if the plan worked, if Kravik's memory could prove the truth, maybe David could get his daughter back. Maybe he could look her in the eyes again without seeing disgust. Worth the risk. Had to be worth the risk. Wednesday brought unexpected problems. Administrator Wells appeared in the kitchen during dinner service. The man was tall, thin, with cold eyes that calculated profit in everything he saw. He walked through the stations like he owned the air itself, which technically he did. "Ross," Wells said, stopping at David's station. "I've been reviewing your performance reports." David kept chopping vegetables. "Yes, sir. You've been spending considerable time with the prisoner in Sector 7. An unusual amount of time for a simple food delivery." "The creature talks, sir." Seems rude not to respond. "The creature is dangerous. It has killed 3 guards and injured a dozen more. Yet you chat with it like an old friend." Wells leaned closer. "Makes me wonder about your loyalties, Ross." "I'm loyal to staying alive, sir. The dragon asked me to come back. Guards told me not to refuse." Wells studied him for a long moment. David forced himself to keep working, to act like his heart wasn't trying to punch through his chest. "See that you remember your place," Wells finally said. "Prisoners who get too comfortable tend to have accidents." The administrator walked away. David's hands shook so badly he had to stop cutting before he lost a finger. Wells knew something or suspected something. 2 more days felt like forever. Thursday night, David barely slept. He went over the plan again and again. Kravik would use his plasma breath to ignite the compounds. The explosion would damage the restraint generators. 30 seconds, maybe a minute before station security responded. Kravik would break the physical chains and tear through the walls to the lower levels. The docking bay was directly below Sector 7, a detail David had confirmed by stealing glances at station maps during cleaning duty. They'd steal Wells' shuttle. Kravik knew the codes from overhearing guard conversations over 40 years. Dragon hearing was sharp enough to catch whispers 3 corridors away. The shuttle had navigation coordinates locked for Sanctuary. Kravik's people would provide the evidence to clear David's name. Simple. Insane. Their only chance. Friday morning arrived too fast and too slow. David went through breakfast prep in a daze. The kitchen supervisor complained about his sloppy work. David apologized and fixed it, all while his mind screamed that this was the last time he'd ever make institutional scrambled eggs. Lunch service. Dinner prep. Every minute crawled past like hours. Finally, the shift ended. David gathered the materials he'd hidden, mixing them into what looked like a normal meal. His hands were steadier now, past the fear, into the calm place where chefs went when everything had to be perfect. Officer Brandt came to collect him. The guard's face was unreadable, but his eyes said goodbye. He knew. Maybe he'd always known. The walk to Sector 7 felt different this time. David noticed details he'd missed before. The spacing of security cameras. The response time of doors. The routes guards took on patrol. Information that might keep him alive in the next hour. They passed through the checkpoints. Each door closing behind them felt like a countdown. 12 doors. 11. 10. The final door opened. Heat washed over David like dragon's breath. And there was Kravik, magnificent and terrible, golden eyes burning with anticipation. The guards took their positions. They expected another normal Friday. Food through the slot, brief conversation, everyone leaves safe. They had no idea this was the last normal moment any of them would see. David loaded the meal into the drawer. The compounds were mixed in perfectly, invisible among the regular food. He pushed it through and watched the mechanical arms extend. Kravik met his eyes across the chamber. A small nod. Are you ready? David nodded back. As ready as he'd ever be. The dragon lowered his head to the tray and began to eat. David counted seconds in his mind. Kravik had said 30 chews, enough to position the compounds precisely. 20 chews. 25.30. Kravik's chest expanded. David saw the glow building deep in the dragon's throat, plasma gathering, temperature rising. One of the guards noticed. Hey, what's it? Kravik exhaled. Fire and thunder filled the world. The explosion was precise, controlled, exactly as planned. The restraint generators sparked and died, blue energy flickering out like candles in wind. Alarm screamed. Guard shouted. And in the center of the chaos, 40 years of captivity ended with the sound of breaking chains. Kravik roared, a sound that shook David's bones and stopped his heart and promised that nothing would ever be the same again. The chains fell away like string. Kravik rose to his full height for the first time in 40 years, wings spreading wide enough to touch the walls. The guards opened fire. Energy bolts struck crimson scales and ricocheted harmlessly into the walls. 40 years of pain and rage focused into a single moment of terrible freedom. David hit the floor as plasma washed over his head. Kravik's breath carved through the reinforced door like paper, melting metal and stone. The heat was incredible. David's skin felt like it was burning just from proximity. Stay close to me, chef. Kravik's voice cut through the chaos. The dragon moved toward David with shocking speed for something so large. One massive claw swept the human up, gentle despite its size. David found himself pressed against Kravik's chest, protected by scale and muscle. The world became fire and noise and movement. More guards poured into Sector 7. Kravik met them with plasma and claws, but he didn't kill them. David noticed that. The dragon could have burned them all to ash, but instead he aimed for weapons, for cover, creating fear without death. Even now, even after everything, Kravik chose mercy. Station alarms howled. Emergency bulkheads began to close. Kravik smashed through them before they could seal, his body a battering ram of scales and fury. They moved down, always down, toward the docking bay 3 levels below. Security teams set up choke points. Kravik burned through them. They activated automated defenses. Kravik's tail shattered the turrets like toys. Nothing stopped him. 40 years of imprisonment had given him plenty of time to plan this route, to memorize every weakness in the station's design. David clung to the dragon's claw and tried not to think about the drop or the fire or the 100 ways this could still go wrong. They'd made it out of Sector 7. That was more than he dared hope for. They reached the docking bay level. Kravik tore through the last door, and they emerged into a massive chamber filled with shuttles and supply ships. Dozens of them, gleaming in the harsh lights. Wells' shuttle is at the far end, Kravik said. The black one with silver markings. They moved across the bay. Behind them, security forces regrouped. David heard shouting, orders being given. They had maybe 2 minutes before the entire station's guard force descended on them. The shuttle was exactly where Kravik said it would be. Expensive, sleek, way too nice for a prison administrator's salary. More evidence of Wells' corruption. Not that it mattered now. Kravik set David down. Can you pilot this? I can try. David ran to the access panel. His fingers flew over the controls, muscle memory from the basic flight training all Earth citizens got. The door hissed open. Got it. Then go. Start the launch sequence. What about you? I will hold them off. Kravik positioned himself between the shuttle and the approaching guards. Get us ready to fly, chef. David ran into the shuttle. The interior was obscenely luxurious, all real leather and wood paneling. He threw himself into the pilot's seat and started the systems. Lights blinked to life. The engine hummed. Navigation showed coordinates already locked in. Sanctuary. Kravik's home. Outside, guards opened fire. David watched through the viewport as Kravik's wings spread wide, shielding the shuttle. Energy bolts struck the dragon and he roared, more anger than pain. But David saw the burns forming on his scales. Even Drake's armor had limits. Kravik, David shouted through the comm, we're ready. Get in. 30 seconds. Kravik called back. More guard arrived. Heavier weapons. David saw them setting up something big, a cannon of some kind. Station defense weapon. One shot from that would kill even a dragon. Kravik now. The dragon backed toward the shuttle, still shielding it with his body. 20 feet away. 10. The guards charged forward, desperate to stop the escape. Kravik leaped into the shuttle bay, wings folding tight. David hit the door control. The hatch began to close. 5 feet. 3. Someone jumped through the gap at the last second. Officer Brandt, weapon drawn, face grim. He pointed the rifle at David's head. For a long moment, nobody moved. David's hand hovered over the launch control. Kravik tensed, ready to defend his friend. Brandt's finger rested on the trigger. Then Brandt shifted his aim and fired at the ceiling. The shot went wide, hitting nothing but empty air. Get out of here, chef, Brandt said quietly. I have a family. I can't help more than this. But I can miss. Their eyes met. David saw regret there, and understanding, and maybe a little hope. Thank you, David whispered. Brandt nodded once and stepped back, lowering his weapon. Shuttle malfunction caused the escape. That's what I'll tell them. Dragons sabotaged the systems. I couldn't stop it. David hit the launch control. The shuttle lifted off the deck, smooth and fast. Through the viewport, he saw Brandt standing alone in the bay, watching them rise. The docking bay doors were already closing. Emergency lockdown. David pushed the throttle forward and aimed for the shrinking gap. 60 feet wide. 40. 20. They shot through with inches to spare. Alarm screamed one last time and then fell silent as the shuttle cleared the station. Space opened around them, cold and infinite and free. But freedom came with a price. The station's main defense cannon powered up. David saw the energy building. Enough firepower to vaporize a small ship. They're going to shoot us down, David said. Kravik moved to the airlock. Not if they shoot me instead. What? No. Trust me, chef. The Drakes are harder to kill than council weapons. The dragon's eyes met his through the viewport. Get to Sanctuary. Tell my people what happened here. Give them my message. That is your shield oath. Kravik, don't. The airlock opened. Kravik launched himself into space, wings spreading impossibly wide against the stars. The dragon flew, beautiful and terrible, directly toward the station. The defense cannon fired. A beam of pure energy crossed the distance in a heartbeat. It struck Kravik head-on, and the dragon disappeared in an explosion bright enough to hurt David's eyes. No. David's scream echoed in the empty shuttle. The blast wave hit, spinning the shuttle end over end. David fought the controls, struggling to stabilize. His eyes burned with tears. 40 years that dragon had survived. 40 years of torture and pain. Finally free, finally flying, and dead within minutes. The shuttle's sensors blinked. David wiped his eyes, tried to read them through his grief. Something was moving out there. Something big, a shape, emerged from the dissipating energy cloud. Crimson scales, massive wings, golden eyes blazing. Kravik flew alongside the shuttle, his voice crackling through the comm. You doubted a Drake could survive that, human? We are harder to kill than council weapons. David laughed and cried at the same time, joy and relief flooding through him. You're insane, perhaps, but we are free, my friend. We are finally free. 3 weeks of travel through space David didn't recognize, following coordinates Kravik had memorized decades ago. The Dragon flew alongside the shuttle most of the time, only coming inside when he needed rest. David learned that drakes could survive in vacuum for hours. Their bodies adapted to environments that would kill most species instantly. They talked during those long days about freedom, about fear, about what waited at the end of their journey. Kravik spoke of his people with a reverence that made David's chest ache. The Drakes had lost so much, survived so little, and still they endured. What if they don't want a human among them? David asked one evening. You are bound to me by shield oath. That makes you family. Kravik's golden eyes were warm. My people understand bonds of honor. They will welcome you. The nebula appeared on the third week, a swirl of colors David had no names for. Beautiful and deadly, the kind of space that made navigation impossible without precise coordinates. Perfect hiding place for a species running from extinction. The shuttle passed through clouds of gas and stellar dust. Sensors went haywire. David flew on instruments and faith, trusting Kravik's memory. Then the clouds parted and David saw a sanctuary for the first time. The planet was smaller than Earth, covered in forests and mountains and oceans that glowed faintly blue. 2 moons hung in the sky like silver coins. And everywhere, dragons. Dozens of them, flying between settlements carved into cliff sides, diving into the glowing oceans, resting on peaks that touched the clouds. Home, Kravik whispered. I never thought I would see it again. They landed in a clearing near the largest settlement. Dragons gathered as the shuttle descended, curious and cautious. David's hands shook on the controls. These were Kravik's people, the survivors of genocide, and he was about to walk among them as the first human most had ever seen. The shuttle door opened. Kravik stepped out first, and the gathered dragons erupted in cries of joy and grief. They surrounded him, touching wings and nuzzling shoulders, speaking in their rumbling language. David caught words here and there. Welcome home. We thought you dead. 40 years. Brother. Friend. Family. An older dragon separated from the group, scales pale with age, moving with the careful dignity of someone who'd earned respect through centuries. The crowd quieted. Kravik, son of the mountain winds. We felt your presence fade from our thoughts long ago. How do you return to us? Elder SYNN. I return through the courage of this human. Kravik gestured to David with one claw. He is bound to me by shield oath. I ask that you hear his story. Every golden, I turned to David. He stepped forward on shaking legs, trying not to think about how many different ways dragons could kill him. My name is David Ross. I was wrongly imprisoned for a crime I didn't commit. Kravik saved my life. In return, I helped him escape. He says he has evidence that can clear my name, but I don't understand how. Elder SYNN studied him with eyes that had seen stars be born. Kravik speaks of his perfect memory. He witnessed your innocence. I was there the night the diplomat died, Kravik confirmed. I saw the true killer. My memory can be extracted and verified with our technology, made into evidence that even the council cannot dispute. The elder nodded slowly. It shall be done. But first you must rest. Both of you have earned peace. The next days passed in a blur. David was given a small dwelling carved into the cliff face, simple but comfortable. Drake's engineers worked with Kravik, using technology David barely understood to extract his memories and create holographic recordings. The process took time, required precision, but when they finished, the evidence was undeniable. David watched the recording with tears streaming down his face. There was the aide, Richard's partner in the scheme, slipping poison into the diplomat's wine while David was in the kitchen. The angle was perfect, the details clear. Kravik had been in the restaurant that night, researching human culture before his capture, hidden in the shadows, seeing everything. This will free you, Elder Syn said gently. We have allies in the council, those who value truth over politics. They will ensure this evidence reaches the right people. Thank you, David whispered. Thank you all. 2 months later, David stood in a clearing outside the settlement, a communication device in his hands. The Drakes had contacted their council allies. David had been cleared of all charges. The Real killers were in custody, including Administrator Wells, who'd been arrested for embezzlement and conspiracy to murder, and his daughter had sent a message asking if they could talk. David's fingers hovered over the call button. Amy's face appeared on the screen, older than he remembered, eyes red from crying. Dad, her voice broke. Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have. Stop, David said gently. You believe the evidence. Anyone would have. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. They talked for hours. About the trial, about the years lost, about forgiveness and family, and starting over. Amy was in college now, studying art. She wanted to visit, wanted to rebuild what they'd lost. David promised he would come back to Earth soon, but first he had something to finish here. The call ended. David sat in the clearing watching dragons fly overhead, their scales catching the light of 2 moons. Kravik landed beside him, massive and magnificent. You are free to return to your world now, the dragon said. The shield oath is fulfilled. I know. David was quiet for a moment, but I was thinking, you saved my life. Your people helped clear my name. I could go back to Earth, reopen my restaurant, or I could stay here while longer. Learn about Drake's culture. Maybe help build bridges between our species. You would do this. Someone has to. Humans and Drakes have been enemies too long. Maybe it's time for that to change. David smiled. Besides, I promised you I'd teach you more about cooking. Can't break a promise to a dragon. Kravik's laugh rumbled like distant thunder. No, human. One cannot break promises to dragons. We remember everything. Speaking of which, David stood and stretched. It's Friday. I've got access to real ingredients now. How about I make us both dinner? I would like that, my friend. They walked toward the settlement together, human and dragon, chef and protector. Behind them, the sun set over sanctuary in colors Earth had never seen. Ahead, the lights of the Drake's homes glowed warm and welcoming. David thought about his restaurant back on Earth, about Amy, about the future. He'd go back eventually, rebuild his life, reconnect with his daughter. But not yet. First, he had dinners to cook and friendships to honor and a whole new world to understand. Every Friday for 40 years, Kravik had waited alone in darkness. Now, every Friday, they'd share a meal under alien stars, and neither of them would ever be alone again. Freedom tasted like hope, like new beginnings, like simple food made with care and shared with someone who understood that the smallest kindnesses could save a life. David Ross had expected to die in prison. Instead, he'd learned to fly.